Hey, I'm Roberto Rodriguez. I lead the Connected DR team within Guidehouse Insights. In my team, we cover everything from the DRs, the solar storage, demand response, and EV charging assets, and all the platforms that connect those to the grid, either for grid management or for market participation.
Thank you, Roberto. My name is Eric Young. I'm the VP of Industry Solutions here at Generac Grid Services. My team does all of the architecture work for clients that use our platform in Concerto, as well as help and coach our clients in the Generac suite of hardware products, as well as some of our partner products that we also can bring to every opportunity for virtual power plants or distributed energy resource management systems.
Given that we are here in Frankfurt, it will be very interesting to know what you are doing with your platform in Europe. I know you have a very long track record in the US, but maybe less is known about your activities in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. In Europe, we're really focused on the ancillary services markets. And so what we've done is taken our platform and adapted it to the secondary reserves market within the ENTSO environment. And what that means is we're able to do frequency regulation on large scale assets, going down even to some of the medium scale assets, generators and loads alike, and take it into that market. We are working with multiple utilities in Europe to do that service, and we're also bringing online tertiary reserves as well. And so we'll have both the secondary and tertiary reserves, both online and in production. We also just entered the UK with a customer in the UK going into the store market. Store market is a load-based service within the National Grid TSO framework.
Thank you. We're going through an energy crisis in Europe where gas prices have spiked, especially during peak hours, and there doesn't seem to be an end. A few months ago, people still thought this will be a one-year event. Now it's here to stay. How do you think demand response platforms can help with this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. We're sitting here at Enlit in Frankfurt, and I'd say it's one of the major themes of the conference is, Europe really has not focused on the traditional demand response programs at the residential level. Yet there's a lot of flexibility to be had at a residential level, as seen in the United States for the last 20 years. Distribution systems are built differently, and so you need a slightly different solution. And Europe is better equipped to handle some of these peaks than the U.S. distribution system is. But this energy crisis has proven that Europe really needs to be thinking about those type of programs and how to bring consumers into the fold when dealing with their energy bill and providing their flexibility into those markets. I think it's really important to for the utilities here and for the BRPs, the balancing responsible parties, to start looking at residential as well as the smaller CNI that has traditionally been excluded from the market.
How do you start a program like this in a region that there's no tradition?
Yeah, without the tradition, I mean, we're literally in an environment now where we have to retrain society on how they use electricity, right? And so, big marketing campaigns. Some of it will probably start off as behavioral, where we look at metering data to determine if somebody participated. And there's programs like this starting up in the UK and as well as other parts of on the European subcontinent. What we really need to do is get into asset level control so that where the hotspots exist, we can go in and precisely solve for those hotspots. That's what platforms like Concerto were designed to do, so that we don't have to affect the entire society, the entire community, just because we have a couple of hotspots in a couple of different areas. And so I think it's really important to get it started and get the society trained by just some of these behavioral type programs where we can run some analytics to see whether they participated, but very quickly move into very deterministic control and very deterministic measurement and verification that they did actually respond. That's important because you can have very low customer sat if you're running events on people and not paying them for performing when they felt like they did, just because their prior days were lighter loads than the current day. And so it is something that we're going to have to spend some time in Europe to help educate both the stakeholders as well as the consumers to be able to do.
That's very interesting. That's exactly my experience as a DR participant in the UK. It's very difficult to know if you did well or what you did before or after that make a difference.
Yes. That's great that you're participating.
Yeah. In the US, you've been doing demand response and DR programs for a while. What's coming next in this market?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of energy being put around the distributed energy resource management system. This is really getting to a substation, to a feeder level, using DERs for not just market services, not just for load drop, but also for grid reliability. That means things like adding load when solar generation is high and removing load during peaks, whether it's morning peak or an afternoon peak. And so we're seeing these things come together, and we have the market services, which is a traditional demand response and ancillary services markets, but now we also have these special use cases for the distribution grid operators to help their system run and stay as reliable as it has been since its inception.
Another significant trend in Europe is the electrification of transport.
Of course, yeah.
We're reaching, I think, around 20% market penetration from EVs or for new sales. This is going to have a massive effect, or is having a massive effect already. How can Concerto help you tackle those issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's three layers of an EV strategy. First is know what they are, where they are, and how they're being charged. Right, and that's a bigger problem than it might sound when you say it. But Concerto and Generac Grid Services can help utility as well as a retailer understand where those EVs are and how they're being charged and how they're being used. The second is to be able to create charging groups so that the charging isn't overlapped. This is part of the problem of real-time pricing or time of use pricing, where you end up with what we call timer peaks, where everybody starts charging at the same time, and you're creating a third or fourth peak during the day. So you're literally trying to solve a problem at the same time making a new problem that needs to be solved. So that leads us to smart charging, where we actually look at the conditions of a feeder, we look at the conditions of a market, and then based on where the state of charge of a vehicle that's plugged in is, we decide how much and how fast to charge that vehicle in the perspective of where it's plugged in, right? And so there's three layers there. Um, I always recommend we start with the first layer. We start with the first step on the staircase. We solve that. We make that work really well, and then we progress up that staircase together, so that as we're starting to manage those electric vehicles, both the consumers and the stakeholders are bought in on how that's being done.
That's very interesting. But how do you start, especially the regulatory environment in Europe is complicated.
It is, and look, speaking from a DSO's perspective, this is now reaching in many cases behind the meter, which has traditionally been off limits. But at the same time, these new large loads that are amassed on a distribution transformer are causing the problem. And so I think the first step is really regulatory, taking a strong look at how the DSO can utilize these loads, because we have to remember there are loads that are causing a problem in the evening, but there are also loads that it could be solving a problem during the day, right? And so they really do have to look at the regulatory rules on how a DSO can interact with their customer, especially where their customer has an electric vehicle or has other large loads in the home. So that's, I think, is step one. I think step two is, let's do this at a production level, not a pilot, not 10 EVs seeing how they act. We know that. We know that from other parts of the world. What we need to do is, in the European context, get to scale with one of these programs where we're moving the charging times around on these vehicles and having that interaction with the consumer on when and how we do that, so we understand how society is going to adopt that type of strategy for EV charging. Because there's a lot of messaging and education that needs to be done to stand one of these programs up. The technology is not a problem. We can do the technology today. We have to, it's all change management now.
Another very important player in this aspect is the energy supplier or energy retailer. How can you help them in this transition?
Yeah, it's another good question. I think the retailer, having that relationship with the customer is absolute critical role to bring those customers into the programs. It also helps them monetize, right? Whether that's just rate arbitrage where the vehicles are able to charge at cheaper times of the day, which saves the consumer money, or it's actually can be incentive based, where the more the customer participates, the more flexible the customer is with how their EV is used in conjunction with the reliability of the grid, maybe the more money they make. And that would be done through the retailer because they have the billing or the monetary relationship with that customer. And so it really is this trifecta of three parties: the optimizing entity, the DSO that has to serve the load, and the retailer that has that relationship.
Another asset class that is growing significantly is energy storage, either behind the meter, front of the meter, or hybrids, wind or solar plus storage. How is Concerto helping those
Yeah,
assets?
it's actually a perfect use case for a system like Concerto because both front of the meter and behind the meter assets have different constraints and requirements, contractual as well as physical constraints around them and how you operate them and how you can use them. And so with Concerto, we can actually program the system to use the different constraints so we can maximize the value of both front of the meter and behind the meter storage. A couple of examples of that would be backing up large solar or wind farms like we do in the Middle East with very large battery systems that are front of the meter connected. We can do things like have, from a real power perspective, back up those and take the intermittency out of the renewables. We can also use them to help manage the voltage levels and the reactive power flows where they're connected, which really helps the developer build a larger system with lower construction costs, lower interconnection costs. On the behind the meter assets, we're doing a lot of work in California with the PSPS events, making sure that those batteries are fully charged before grid disconnect happens so that the consumer can actually run on them longer. Most of those are solar storage hybrid systems. And so there is some charging during the day with a whole home backup system so that the solar and the battery can actually work without the grid connection, right? Which is different than if you only had solar. And when the power goes out without an ATS, automatic transfer switch, you would actually lose your solar during that outage. And so even though you have solar on your roof, you would still not have any electricity. And so we can help solve that through the PSPS events. But then in general, some of the market services, demand response, discharging a battery in many cases is better than shutting off a critical load. And so by harnessing that energy storage, we're able to bring that into other market services beyond disconnects and beyond just renewable firming or backing up those renewable plants.
Another area that is growing significantly due to the energy crisis in Europe is heat pumps. And at least the theory is that they will be easily integrated into the grid.
Mm.
Uh, do you see that?
Yeah, I think heat pumps are a huge savings from an energy efficiency perspective. And so you're able to take something that uses an enormous, say, a water heater or an air conditioner, even that just uses a lot of energy when it's on, and a heat pump uses substantially less. From a demand response or a load shift perspective, I think we just have to be a lot more careful with them than we would a conventional unit, right? A heat pump water heater will heat water just fine, and it'll run low and slow in an economy mode and keep your water warm. But if you shut that off, there's a probability that when you turn it back on, it's going to go to its resistive backup coil, and you're going to end up with a bigger peak than what you just avoided, right? And so there's just a lot more engineering that goes into controlling a heat pump system. Not to say it's impossible. Technology, my answer is always technology isn't the problem, right? It's how you use it, how you adopt it. And so having a platform like Concerto that allows you to put those constraints in and use the modes of the heat pump rather than a hard off, hard on like you would with HVAC control or you would with a resistive water heater is really important. And so we look at California that's mandating CTA 2045 control of water heating as well as heat pump water heaters. Other countries here in Europe, especially Northern Europe, that are mandating all heat pump, all new installations, and all replacements go to heat pumps. I think it is germane on the industry to be able to figure out the right control strategies for those units such that we can capture the flexibility they do provide because it will be different than what the traditional demand response programs offer.
Um, where do you see the most activity for a platform like Concerto?
I think it's a complex answer to that question. It depends on the geography. So here in Europe, what we're seeing is the retailers uh, using our platform to support their market services. And so they'll take a market position and then use Concerto underneath the covers in order to be able to optimize and orchestrate how those assets respond to those markets and those clear bids. Uh, and so that has been a really good business for us, and we have really good customer here in Germany that we're very tightly partnered with. When we look at the rest of the world, everybody's a little bit different. Australia has a capacity problem. They're seeing energy rates that go into the $10,000 plus megawatt hour, and so being able to use Concerto as a VPP to capture that value when that happens, it not only helps keep the lights on for the population of Australia, but it also allows the retailers and the gentailers in Australia to be able to make money when otherwise they'd be completely out. So it helps them. In the United States, there's still a very large DR market, and we're doing a lot of demand response in the United States and in North America, Canada included. But there's also now DERMS becoming more and more prevalent, where we're looking at a substation level, and at the substation being able to manipulate the interaction of those assets with the feeder itself in order to preserve reliability as well as voltage levels as the hosted capacity of renewables is going up on those feeders. And so we're definitely seeing a mix across the globe. The Middle East is really about renewable firming and backing up large renewable facilities, usually in the hundreds of megawatts. It's very different than the rest of the world, and so it's been a privilege that Concerto is adaptable to all of these different environments in these different markets because everyone has got different market rules. And I think the single best thing we could do as an industry is decide we're all going to do the same thing the same way. Probably not in our
Yeah,
lifetimes, but we've
it's a
had to
nice
build a
dream.
platform around it.